Okay, we're now joined by Maz Grader, who is the producer of The Rise of Jordan Peterson. I'm looking forward to this one. Maz, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
All right, so Maz, your film asks a few questions about Jordan Peterson, but I want to narrow in on one moment at the start. Now, probably like one of my favorite bits was when Jordan says to camera that this is what I look like, and it's just like Jordan Peterson's face. And then he picks up this like pretty frightening mask and he wears it and says, this is what my critics think I look like. And I think Patricia, your wife and the director of the film, then asks him which one is real. And he says they're both real. So you and Patricia spent a lot of time with Jordan Peterson. To you, which one was real?
I'd say that every time I see that bit in the film, I always think about that Kubrick film, Full Metal Jacket, where they're talking about kind of like the duality of man. Honestly, I think the most interesting characters and the most interesting kind of memorable documentary subjects, fiction too, are the people that kind of walk that line between the both. So I would really say, like, it really is a matter of perspective. I mean, for some people, Jordan is this, a kind of like a messiah, and for other people, he's this villain. It's also something that we tried to bring out in the movie poster. That might be good for you guys to check out. I don't know if you've seen it, but essentially what we have there is we have Jordan Peterson kind of like as this iconic figure, and people along the bottom half of the poster on the left and to the right of him, quite literally, right? The people on the left are pointing at him, are masking their face while condemning him. This is like Antifa and some of the leftist activists that have kind of detracted from him. And on the other side, you have people on the conservative side, broadly speaking, that have seen him as kind of like a messiah and saying those things that they were also thinking about. So I think for many people, for many people that look at it in a more of a skin deep sort of way, it's really one or the other. But for me, kind of as a filmmaker, the most interesting characters are when they're a little bit of both, and complexity is what's driven the story and it's made it so engaging from the beginning to the end. So, but at the same time, I would say that for me, like Jordan has been more. He's also helped me out with some certain things, like a lot of young people. So I would say that his contribution to the conversation has been positive, even though some people have seen things, in another light. So that would be my take on that.
That's interesting, Maz. So you mentioned in that answer that some people think that Jordan Peterson thinks he's a messiah. You spent a lot of time with him at close quarters. Do you think he thinks he's a messiah of sorts?
I don't think he thinks that in a very specific sort of way. I would say that it's kind of like his whole career, he's been a clinical psychologist. So he's been all about kind of one-to-one relationships with people, helping them out with their problems, talking out their troubles. So in that light, he wants to be a helper. He wants to be somebody that people look to help them out through their interpersonal problems, with career, with romance, with agreeableness, specifically dealing with neuroticism, the life's lows. And so I think in many ways he's sort of risen to the occasion to kind of become that for many people. But I wouldn't say specifically that he would. I think he's smart enough to know not to fall. You don't want to fall in love with the archetype that people are claiming that you are, because then it gets very dangerous, and then you kind of fall in love with your own self-image, and that would be I think that's really the end of the persona, because it would overtake you. So I think he's well aware of that. So that would be my take on that.
Okay, so you start this film in 2015, but Jordan's Professor Against Political Correctness, which I guess is like the spark for his international superstardom, those videos weren't made until 2016. So what initially attracted you to make a documentary about him?
Yeah, good question. So originally we approached Jordan about a year and a half before the pronoun videos came out. We were interested in his friendship with the indigenous carver Charles Joseph that comes from a tribe in the remote parts of Vancouver Island. So that was the original film we were doing. It was basically a story about a friendship. So, Jordan Peterson coming out of Harvard, big academic background, a lot of cred to his name, even before he's become super famous. And then you have Charles Joseph, who at the time and for most of his life, he's been illiterate. He struggled with depression. He's had a lot of turmoil in his life. At times he was homeless. But they met at this hippie art fair like 15 years ago, and Jordan just started buying art from the guy, and he started to build a relationship. And he looked at this guy and he said, "Okay, this isn't just somebody making crafts and trying to sell their wooden pieces at some fair. This is a real artist. This is a raw artist." And Jordan appreciated the fact that Charles knows all the stories of the artifacts that he builds. And Jordan, of course, is no surprise that if you're somebody that's into Jung and if you're somebody that's into Nietzsche, it's natural that you're going to be very curious about mythology, stories, symbolism. So that's kind of like the relationship that started to develop in the conversations they were having. And then what Charles kind of gets out of the friendship is that Charles has been, I think it's a little bit similar to Australia, where Canada has this dark history where Native kids were taken away forcefully from their parents and they were put into these residential schools. And some of these schools were Christian schools run by priests and nuns. And Charles Joseph, for most of his childhood, he was molested by these priests. And he was told he can't speak his language, he can't do his dances. They shaved his head, so it's very traumatic for the guy. So, and this is something that Charles Joseph still kind of deals with. And even through his adulthood, and Charles is around the same age as Jordan, and even through his adulthood, he has had, he dreams of himself still as a child, and he kind of sees himself as this child that's fighting against the stuff he went through as a kid. But through counsel with Jordan, they have these Skype conversations that we filmed a few. Jordan's helped him to kind of self-actualize and kind of become whole again by kind of guiding him through and helping him make sense of his past so he could build a more positive future. So that was the original film we were doing. It was essentially a story about a friendship. We have two very, very different characters that are both have a deep passion for mythology and art and meaning, and they help each other out in very unique ways. And then, of course, everything changed when the political turmoil happened, and he's in the news literally every day. Every week there was a new scandal. He's on Joe Rogan, millions of views later. And our job as filmmakers is essentially to keep the camera on.
That sounds fascinating. It must an amazing stroke of luck, I guess, to be there when this sort of historic event happened. That must have been fantastic for you as a filmmaker. You were there when Jordan Peterson took off. You were there the whole time. You had your cameras on, as you said. What did you notice? Did anything change about Jordan Peterson at this time?
Yeah, there was a few things. I mean, one of the first things, and I think you guys will remember that very, very first scene, like that's a bit of a shocker to people. Like some people can't even, like when they see that guy at the table doing that personality test with his family, they have to do a bit of a double take. Like, is that Jordan Peterson? Like he looks so different than what he looks like now. And that has a lot to do with his diet. So diet played a big role in kind of his mood regulation and the way he looks. So that was a big change. There was a big physical change associated. Also, like Jordan, for most of his career, like you meet somebody at a party and they say, well, what do you do? And Jordan, somebody would say, well, I'm a psychologist and I'm a professor. Jordan hasn't taught a class at University of Toronto in years, and he doesn't do his clinical practice anymore. Like his whole life has changed so quickly. And the very end of the film, he kind of describes that, how it's kind of like this this detachment from his life and who he feels he is. So there's a kind of like this, what's called derealization, the separation between himself and his life. So the changes that we've seen have been that his life has moved so quickly, and I think he's done relatively well to adapt. But I think the thing that I've noticed with Jordan is that in that first scene, we wanted to make the personality test the first scene of the film because we wanted to kind of make a promise to the audience that says, okay, you guys are going to see something you've never seen before. And what you see there, and what I always remember about that scene every time I see it, is that there's kind of like a lightheartedness to Jordan. He's kind of laughing with his family, and it's very kind of like carefree, and they're poking fun at him. And honestly, I haven't seen Jordan that kind of relaxed in a long time, and I think that partly has to do with the polarization of the media interpretations. I mean, this guy's a messiah, this guy's the devil. You know, it's this binary system that he's kind of caught up in, and that's essentially the culture war. You know, the culture war has kind of hardened him and kind of hardened his skin, I think, and it's also made him kind of take things very, very seriously, and that's exactly who Jordan is. I mean, he's a person that you give the guy responsibility, you put a big rock on his back, he's going to carry the thing. So he's much more serious, and he's much more kind of focused, and it's actually all come a little bit to a complete halt, right? Because I'm sure you know the news. I mean, he's gone to rehab. He's had to kind of take a step back and refocus and kind of rebuild some of the basic parts of the self. So that's kind of where he's at right now. We hope he comes back soon.
Yeah, I want to talk about the critics as well, because when you make a film like The Rise of Jordan Peterson, you know that the audience is going to be mainly made up of fans of his. But in this film, you interview people on the other side of the original protest at the University of Toronto. You interview former neighbours of his that have fallen out with him. So what was the decision to talk to his critics like, and especially conscious of the people who are going to end up watching this film are usually going to be fans of his?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, like, what our intent with this film was never to be the kind of film that we didn't have a specific audience in mind, like a film for the fans, a film for the haters. We wanted to show the complexity of the guy. We wanted to show how we basically wanted to give an honest take of what people think of the guy and what people have been saying, how he's reacted to it. And that's part of kind of like the whole duality that we want to do, right? Like it's you can't have a good story without conflict. And sometimes, the best stories are real life. So for us, it was this crazy roller coaster where there was a scandal every week. So it was important to include the voices that critique the guy. So it's that much more of a shame that we've had these cancellations. We've had this negative press from people that haven't even seen the film, that are claiming, you shouldn't give Jordan Peterson a platform. The typical kind of mainstream, kind of superficial kind of criticisms about a guy that kind of falls outside of political correctness. It's a shame that these people reacted in this way, because if they were to actually watch it, they would see that it's a balanced film that allows space. So the name of our production company is Holding Space Film. So Holding Space is about holding space for people that you agree with and especially that you don't agree with. And so it was important for us to include those voices in the film to create, to offer a more whole picture of the guy, and to let the audience, let you guys think what you want of him.
Last question, and thanks so much for your time. But last question. There's so much of Jordan Peterson's work out there. There's so much of what he thinks and so much content that people watch. But you're someone that spent so much time with him. What is one thing that we don't know about Jordan Peterson?
Good question.
Good question, man. Jordan is a guy that's working through his ideas, his problems in real time for us, before our eyes. That can alienate people. People can get the wrong idea. People can take a little soundbite and create polarization, as if we're creating this kind of binary between the good and the bad. So fundamentally, I think that Jordan is a guy figuring out the world around him, trying to make sense of it, trying to do it through story and through dialogue. And I think that it's a good model for people to work it out, because the thing of it is that if you're not talking, you're fighting. And free speech fundamentally, and the thing that he advocates for, one of the things is that, is free speech. And in my view, and I come from, I came to Canada as a refugee. I was born in Iran, obviously a totalitarian country without free speech. And look at what's happening there right now as we speak. So fundamentally, I think free speech is about that kind of the valve for society to allow them to kind of release tension and to let things out there. Because if you don't do that, it just goes right into the underground. So I think Jordan is kind of like this avatar who's living out his philosophies before us for a greater good, I hope, and honesty. And I think that candid approach is something that's therapeutic, I think, for him and for us to bear witness to.
Maz Grader, the film Rise of Jordan Peterson, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maz.